people, climate funders, they do it every year. That pledge and do not keep to their agreement. It just means that they lack integrity. It is not ethical. It is not fair, and so it makes our work like a circus going over and over again, making the same demand already made. The last crop will come back, will repeat it, you say the same thing to get to a point that people, if at the entire crop meeting, people may not see the need to even attend anymore. That okay, what's the point? You will come together every year, you make promises year in, year out, and you do not keep them. So what's the point of the meeting? And you see that we will begin to lose interest in negotiations or in mediation and just take more drastic steps.
Hello and welcome to Planet Critical, the podcast for a world in crisis. My name is Rachel Donald. I'm a climate corruption journalist and your host. Every week I interview experts who are battling to save our planet. My guests are scientists, politicians, academics, journalists, and activists. They explain the complexities of the energy, economic, political, and cultural crises we face today, revealing what's really going on and what they think needs to be done. These are the stories of the big picture. Go to planetcritical.com to learn more and subscribe. My guest this week is Esther Afolaranmi. Esther is a lawyer and the founder of Golden Love and Hands of Hope Foundation in Nigeria, an NGO working towards helping the vulnerable and underprivileged of society. Some of the work they do is improving access to education, advancing women's rights, girls' liberation, and also lobbying the UN with regards to reparations for climate damages. Esther joined me today to discuss all of these things, from the legal necessity of getting those who caused the damage to pay up, to the importance of women's education when it comes to family planning. And there's this wonderful moment in the episode where Esther talks about the fact that these kinds of reparations, philanthropy even, it's not about giving charity. It's about giving people legal rights that are being granted in other parts of the world, but not to the most marginalized. Now, we did have connectivity issues during recording, which is why this episode is a bit shorter than usual and has slightly lower quality. That's just a heads up before we dive in, but the content is absolutely critical to understanding the wider picture of what's going on in the world, and also the particular context of what is going on in Nigeria. I hope you all enjoy the episode. If you do, please share it far and wide. And if you're loving the show, become a patron on Patreon or support Planet Critical with a paid subscription at planetcritical.com. By signing up, you'll get the Planet Critical newsletter inspired by each episode delivered straight to your inbox every week. You'll also have access to the wonderful Planet Critical community who are full of inspiring thoughts, ideas, critiques, and determination. The links are in the description box below. I'm so grateful to everyone who chooses to support the project. I'm a vehement believer in ad-free and open access content, so Planet Critical wouldn't exist without the direct support of the amazing community. Thank you so much to all of you who believe in Planet Critical and keep the project going every week. Thank you so much for joining me on Planet Critical. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Rachel. It's a pleasure to have you also.
My very first question for you is, why is the world in crisis?
Okay, from my perspective, my name is Esther, first of all. Let me introduce myself. I am a co-executive director at First Star Movement, also the founder of Golden Love and Hands of Hope Foundation here in Nigeria. The world is in a crisis from our perspectives because a lot of wealthy industrialists, a lot of wealthy people and manufacturers have over time, due to their activities, increased the production of greenhouse gas emissions, and which has blanketed the earth, trapping the sun's heat and leading generally to global warming and severe climate crisis and climate changes. So the crux of our movement is that these people should be made accountable and be able to make reparations to children and to future generations, basically.
Excellent. Now, are we talking about fossil fuel companies that should be made accountable, or governments?
Government, industrialists, both alike.
Let's dig into this idea of future generations, because I'm aware that in quite a lot of Indigenous communities around the world, this idea of thinking about 7 generations in the future is quite normal, and 7 generations in the past, having this sort of understanding of like deep time. And the Western world is very bad at thinking more than a few steps ahead, essentially,
Yeah.
and also very bad at changing course when heading for a brick wall. So part of this work that you're doing around future generations, why did you choose that as a kind of way to think about the problem? Why is that important with regards as well for Nigeria as a country?
Okay, first of all, it's important to be personally because I'm sure everyone has a feel of the climate crisis. It has become incredibly hot here in Lagos. The weather is no longer comfortable as it used to, and generally, the climate conditions are generally worsened. So, for us personally, it is a problem. But in order to be futuristic, also, we are thinking that if it's as much as a problem for us now, how bad can it get to those coming after us? And so that's the entire idea that okay, it has gotten so worse that we are even feeling it and much more future generation. And so we need to be able to cater in advance for some of the problems they may encounter and be able to mitigate them as much as we can, because we believe in children, we believe in the future. And so for us in the indigenous part of the world like Africa, where things generally are kind of backward as compared to Europe, we are the greatest hit of the entire changes. Children are no longer able to go to school, crops are dying, people are hungry, the poverty level generally has increased, and just that's just because some wealthy industrialists in Europe and other parts of the world has thought it wise to do whatever they do and cause this much damage to the world. And we just feel like there should be some form of reparations to this part of the world because we have been at the greatest hit of the climate changes.
Yeah, totally. Now, reparations, climate reparations, is kind of being discussed under the banner of loss and damages at
Yeah,
COPs conferences to differing levels of success or failure. With some deals now being pushed through, although apparently, as we see time and time again, promises can be made at these COP conferences, and then people will refuse or
usually.
fail to pay out the money they pledged. Yeah. So these reparations that you're talking about, sort of for the past, and also I'm hearing for the future, like reparations for future generations, which is a really interesting idea. Is this similar to the idea of loss and damages?
Exactly. As like I said earlier, we are just calling for a fair analysis of the situation, which part of the world or who has been the greatest hit of your production, of what you've been doing, of your wealth. Basically, Africa really doesn't produce much, and most of the things that we have here are imported. So that's just to show that we are a low producing nation or country or continent, and at the end of the day, we are still suffering for the deeds of people that produce more. So we're just asking for a fair analysis of it. Okay, um, what loss has it brought to us, and what damage is it set to bring to us, and how can we mitigate this? How can we make things better for you? And I mean, I think that's what is fair at the end of the day. And so we've actually come across or we have bettered different initiatives like what we're doing in Uganda, the Seed for Future Africa project. So basically, it's just that it's a situation where we analyzed the current climate, like loss and damages. Okay, and you pledge in terms of children's savings accounts to children in Uganda, and just put something in there for them, and also provide food for their women and empowerment, empower them to do better, to be able to get out for their children. And basically, we have different initiatives across India, across Uganda, across Africa. But the crux of our program is that we it may come in any form really. For Uganda, it's children savings accounts. For India, it is also something similar. Then for Nigeria, it's through climate education and meditating because first of all, we also feel like it is directly linked to population control. And because we've not been able to, maybe due to literacy and some other problems, we've not been able to manage our population well in Africa, in India, and because of the mentality that we have here, the mental slavery. So, first of all, we are starting an education campaign on family policies, um, and how you can prevent unwanted pregnancies at the end of the day. So you don't end up birthing children that causes future problems in the world, and you're not able to cater for basically because yeah, people just believe that you can give birth to children as much as you want, whether you can cater for them or not, and which is it is not it's not a right way to think. And some of them in some part of our culture, people men believe that women don't own their bodies and so they're just meant to give birth as much as they can. And we still have limiting beliefs like that. So we need to first of all break away from that barrier. And it's funny how people that are less privileged are the ones that give birth to children more in our part of the world, probably because they don't have access to medical care, they don't have access to family planning and all of that, and because of that mental slavery. So first of all, we because we believe that the climate change is also linked to population control, we are trying as much as possible to educate the people here, um, and that's what we're doing basically.
That's phenomenal. What a run through of all sort of the sort of available things. Obviously, at the moment, a big problem is that a lot of these organizations that you're talking about are sort of like philanthropically funded, right? From sort of one time donations or recurring donations rather than being offered these legal reparations, these loss and damages from governments that
Yeah.
have been responsible for the vast majority of the historical emissions. And that's a real issue. Now, I heard that one of the reasons Western governments are really reticent to sign up to loss and damages is because it will be like admitting harm, which will then open them up to a whole range of possible legal cases. Now, I
Yeah.
know that you trained as a lawyer, so maybe you can speak to that as well. What do you think are the legal possibilities for building reparations cases, and then possibly as well taking these governments to court, possibly to the International Court of Justice.
Okay, yes, you are right. A lot of people do not want to admit that's why they don't want to make donations because it's like you said, it is deemed as an admission. And so really that controversy exists. And so because we actually the kind of perspective we are coming from, we're not saying that you should give as charity, like we are proposing that you give as like a right, like you're expected to do so,
Mm.
so you need to do. And so maybe that may be the challenge because we're not expecting giving as charity, but we're expecting them to give as a matter of right. And so we've had a lot of wealthy funders pull back, and immediately they hear that, and maybe we'd come across one or two of our literatures on the internet or our blogs, because that's really what we're proposing the UN to do, making it first of all as a basic right that now gives us the basis for our claim, right? So I understand that perspective, I understand that point, but at the same time, not also taking responsibility is not going to do us any good. Also, so like even though that, but that's the thing. If you make reparations, even in law, we have reparations claims. It may not be pre-imprisonment. That's why we have fines, right? That okay, even though you admit that you did something wrong, you can just pay monetary reliefs to these people. And so that preparation can come off as fine, as a fine, right? And it really doesn't mean anything as far as we see that they are trying to right the wrong. And so nobody's trying to imprison anyone, nobody's trying to make anyone pay in a negative way for whatever they've done. We can both benefit from what they are doing for their from their wealth and from their production. Continue, you know what, continue your production, but at the same time, um, set aside funds also for for the damage your production is doing, and it's a 50-50 win actually. So the policy actually needs to be clear, and we are not out to hurt anyone, even in our UN letters and policies that we are filing before the UN petition. So you will see that we are also considerate. We we're not trying to set them up for any legal action or whatever. We're just trying to say that okay, they should be fair, and we're not filing suits unjustly or anyhow. So
I think something that is perhaps slightly under discussed with regards to loss and damages or these ideas of climate reparations is the mutual benefit of
yeah.
ensuring that, the continent of Africa, which is huge and it has so many people and will only continue to have more people, does not
Mhm.
have to go through an industrial revolution in order to develop or give certain resources that it may social and political resources that it may want to give to its different populations. That is critical. We need to bypass the industrial revolution and go straight to a kind of green justice transition degrowth global model. Essentially, we cannot afford to have the same emissions up in the air as were started sort of 200 years ago by Western Europe.
Yeah, definitely. So it's just like you
Mm.
said, it's just for us to have sit down conversations and have plans, policies in place for us. And once we see that that is up, I feel like we are going to be fine with the arrangement.
Oh, I think that's a very optimistic outlook. I certainly hope, but given how much a fight it has been, even getting loss and damages to the table at COP26, and the fact that other climate pledges that were made at these kinds of conferences, then the funds aren't being paid into. It's it's hard to see in sort of this increasingly polarized world how we can come to agreements that are actually fair when there is so much that is designed for unfairness.
Exactly. An agreement like that being not kept just worsens the situation, just making you feel like you're taking us for granted. And so, like you said, it may eventually lead to a revolution or another crisis globally, world war. We can't say how it's going to be like yet, but I think I want to use this medium to say that people climate funders that because they do it every year that pledge and do not keep to their agreement, it just means that they lack integrity. It is not ethical, it is not fair. Do not say what you cannot keep, do not promise what you cannot keep, and best of all, stand by whatever you promise, because you for them to make that promise, they know it's not fair. There was a reason why they made the promise, and you just going back on your agreement and your promise, it's not really the best. And so you meet our wall, like a circles going over and over again, making the same demands already made. The last crop will come back, will repeat it, you say the same thing to get to a point that people, in fact, the entire crop meeting, people may not see the need to even attend anymore. That okay, what's the point? You will come together every year, you make promises year in, year out, and you do not keep them. So what's the point of the meeting? And you will see that we will begin to lose interest in negotiations or in mediation and just take more drastic steps.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that this is particularly sort of prescient with regards to the genocide that's ongoing as well at the moment in Palestine by Israel,
Yeah.
and how all of like law just seems to be sort of crumbling around us in a sense. Um, because the institutions that rely on it are making a farce of it. They're turning it into a joke. They're saying, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, it's one law for others, but not for us, essentially. And that's kind of always been the way, but now it's really, really blatant. And so, with, making pledges at COP and not sticking to them, signing up to treaties and not following them, breaking international law,
Mhm.
ignoring sort of the directives of the international community. I mean, it's really dangerous. They're tearing down the structures that need to be in place to combat this really global problem that we have.
Yeah. And once there's a lack of trust in the system, it leads to the kind of results that you see in Palestine. And people no longer trust the system, so everyone is trying to be the government in their own space, and it just generally leads to a breakdown of law and order, and that's already what it's coming to be in Nigeria. We have laws that are not being followed. So why are the laws there in the first place? Most of the laws are rather lived in denial, and so it questions the entire system. What's the point? And everyone is doing anyhow they like, not minding the repercussion of the law, because in the first sense it's like a joke. There is no enforcement of it, and especially the fact that international treaties are non-enforceable. There are just many adversary, and I think that's another factor, because it is really is left to state discretions to follow, and unfortunately we have leaders that do not have integrity, and so that's what happens.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's important, you just mentioned sort of the situation in your home country. It's important as well to talk about, I think, the fact that, Nigeria is sort of the biggest oil producing country in the continent of Africa, but it also imports all of its necessary fuel, right? So it's exporting the raw, essentially, fossil fuels, raw oil, crude oil, sorry, because it doesn't have the sort of capacity to transform it. And then it's forced to import at these extortionate prices, and it makes no sense, and it kind of falls under this thing again when people talk about like the resource curse, as if having a lot is some kind of makes you fall prey to magic or to spells or sorcery, or it's just bad luck. No, it's very much designed in a way, this sort of political international system that we have, that some get a lot while the majority get very little.
Okay, so I think the reason for that is because our leaders are actually taking advantage of the entire program and kind of using it to siphon money. Because there is no way that an entire government will not be able to build refineries that can refine this crude oil locally. And it's the same promise from every government year in, year out. Oh, vote for me as president. I'm going to build a refinery in Nigeria. We don't get to export our crude oil and import, because these things come at a cost to us, right? And even now they have removed subsidy. Before it was being subsidized by the government, which was another scam by the way, but okay, at least there was a form of subsidy. Now there's no longer subsidy. We are bearing the cost of the entire refined product ourselves. Per liter petrol has gone to like close to 1,000 just for a liter, and being that electricity is not really good in Nigeria, so we kind of power ourselves, our homes, our offices ourselves. And so you can just imagine the cost it is on us, and how inflation has worsened over time because of this. And so, like, it's just like I said, it's the matter of people having no integrity, people just wanting to take advantage of others, not keeping to their promises. Every time they always talk about building. This is a whole in, and we call ourselves the giant of Africa. This is an entire country with so much resource, but still being wasted, and it's just unfortunate. It's just really unfortunate.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point to kind of address, because personally, I think the conversation around like power and corruption is often like not nuanced enough. And there's this sort of trend, let's say, to like villainize certain characters in this story, right? So the West or the fossil fuel companies, or and don't get me wrong, yes, they're responsible for a huge, huge, huge amount of damage and for designing this system that is exploitative, and is extractive and is unjust. However, as you said, it's the fact also that there are people and leaders who are willing to also choose corruption, which is, why those people can then enter into a country and extract the resources and exploit the people.
Exactly.
And I think that leads us on nicely, though, to education and women's empowerment and population, because these are the things, well, certainly sort of like women's education, like and education more widely, these are the things that really sort of change the prospects of a people, of a community. And especially with regards to being able to choose your family size so that you are less dependent on the structures around you for survival in order just to feed your kids, for example. Like, not like being able to choose to not go into, debt bondage in, the 21st century, um, because you have a smaller family size thanks to your education and thanks to available sort of like medical resources. So maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, our current project aims to do justice to that, and because we found a really large education gap, and which constitutes majority of our problem, and so that it is more like people in the West are more informed than us, and we still have a lot of people living in illiteracy, in serious mental slavery, in this part of the world. And a lot of people, it's not their fault, they do not know. So we're open to bring light to people like that, and making them understand that you can make informed choices about your body. You don't have to be like that. Why do you have such belief that your life is dependent on the number of children you're able to bear? Or cultures really that really just promote that okay, as a woman you're just supposed to be bearing children and you have no say really on the amount of children that you're supposed to have. And so that education, that lack of education also constitutes a problem, and because many people are not able to make informed decisions about family planning. And even people that know, they do not have resources, medical resources to aid family planning. And family planning, it's not cheap, it's kind of expensive also. And these are people already living in poverty. They cannot afford to feed, they cannot afford to eat. How then can they be able to have the resources for medical facilities to be able to prevent pregnancies? And so it's really connected. Education, being able to be empowered medically to make decisions also about your body, and just trying to break off that shackle of illiteracy really. It's something that we are trying to do also, especially in this part of the world. Like, there need to be a lot of sensitization, there need to be a lot of education. And so we recognize that and we are working towards it.
Now, some pushback to this kind of argument that you hear sometimes is, well, it's the global 1% who are consuming the majority of the resources and who are emitting more than the bottom two-thirds of humanity. So is it a population problem? Is it not rather, an inequity problem? Like, we have enough to go around, and it's very dangerous to start talking about population reduction. What would you say as a counter argument to that?
Okay, I think it's both actually. It's a population problem and it's also an inequity like I said, the other one. And because the resources are already scarce, right? And we are trying to rationalize it. And if, on the other hand, we do not control population, you will see that your efforts might be futile at the end of the day, because we are trying at this point to rationalize the resources, the already scarce resources, and we are just there increasing population and making policies that make people that are not population control driven. It just makes the entire world futile. So I feel like the two of them go hand in hand. And I'm not saying population reduction in a dangerous way. I'm not the one that they were proposing in India, trying to kill people. No, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ones that comes with informed decision, that comes with proper planning. Oh, we understand that we are not supposed to bear children that we are not able to cater for, and it's a matter, as a matter of law, not as a matter of choice. And that's part of what we're advocating before the UN. That, okay, you know what, you guys need to, as the international body that regulates these things, the international space, you need to actually make a central law that allows people to not really give people the choice to be able to bear any amount of children because they can, but being able to attach some level of control to either. Okay, you are not able to cater for these children, so you're not supposed to give birth to as more children that you cannot cater for, because at the end of the day they end up becoming problem society. You find most of them on the streets, begging, constituting nuisance, just generally increasing crime and all of that. And so we're not saying that there should be any form of drastic method attached to the population control, the one that now involves killing people, or saying that, or not giving them, how would I put it, maybe too restrictive choices. We're not talking about that. But we're talking about, okay, just implementing a central law that allows people to only give birth to children that they can take for, first of all. And on the other hand, it's also, like you said, the resources are scarce, and so we need to be able to mitigate population and find a way to work around it. And you said it's an inequality problem, which is actually true. The 1% of the 1% truly exist, and why the third, like you said, are struggling for the remaining resources. And that also is a problem, and that also forms part of our argument, right? So in our argument or in our claims, the two are very essential and forms serious part of our claims.
I think it's, I mean, listen, I'm all for sort of the conversation around population, and I'm definitely for sort of highlighting to people the kind of like pro-natalist like attitude that we tend to have in the world, and that often comes at the expense of women and girls. I was listening to a podcast just this morning actually, with a guy, oh, I can't remember his name, but he's called Britain's leading demographer. He's got some new population book out, and he was talking about the fact that um, it seems, that in countries that are sort of like Christian or Islamic, they don't have this, population crash because there's this focus on the family. And obviously, for me, there's this very other frame present there, which is that it's not that these religions necessarily have a focus on the family, but rather in very many branches of these religions, women's rights historically have been stamped out. And it was women's job as within that religion to provide more followers of that religion. And so the more that you emancipate and liberate women and give them the right to choose what they do with their own bodies, looks like they have less children as a consequence of that. And so rather than it being the kind of conversation around like what people should or shouldn't do, and thinking of it as these like top down, these quite frightening top down authoritarian policies, whether that's, China's child policy, which is, anti-natalist, or, well, exactly. Yeah. We don't want that. Nobody wants that. But if you frame it just as a conversation of like, if you liberate women and give them an education and let them choose, they seem to solve the problem themselves, essentially. And who cannot get behind, girls' education and women's liberation?
Okay, so it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. Breaking off from cultures, traditions, religious beliefs that we've held on to for so long, can be a lot of challenges rather in breaking it off. And so that is part of the problems that we face and they are currently facing. A lot of people are not really open to change, except we are able to offer them something better, right? So and so that's when, okay, for the sake of your children, if you do this, we probably you're eligible for maybe some form of benefit or something. And it has gotten to that point, Sha, that we begin to insensitize the whole arrangement. But really, that's the stage in that we are in now. Because you cannot just come to someone that is hungry and that is really down, that is kind of poor, and you're just telling them, oh, change this, change that, and you're not really ready to offer anything, right? So they may not even listen to you. So that's what we're trying to do now. That's why alongside what we are doing, the education, we are also doing women empowerment and trying to keep them busy as much as possible and trying to empower them first of all before even trying to break off from that shackle, because we have to come to them with something and we've recognized that. And so That's forms part of the arrangement, the women empowerment alongside women liberation. Um, and so that's what we've identified, and that's what we're working towards.
Well, Esther, I think you're doing wonderful work. Thank you very much. And I was really grateful to have you here with me today. I wish I could have kept you on longer, but I think our internet connections are just just going to be the end of this. Listen,
I'm so
my
sorry, but yeah.
oh, please don't apologize. It's been great speaking to you, and we've muddled through. Please don't apologize. My final question for you though is, who would you like to platform?
Okay, I think I'd like to platform Mass. I can't really pronounce the surname, but robots, and at least I can pronounce that. Is doing great work in Uganda, empowering women and kids. He runs Rejoice Foundation in Uganda, and it's really doing well. It's really doing well. It's at the center of the Seed for Future campaign, and so I think it would be great to bring him on the program to tell you part of his work is doing in Uganda and in Africa as a whole.
Wonderful. Esther, thank you so much
So
for your time today. If you want to learn more, I've put links to everything in the description box below. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you're new here and share the episode if you enjoyed it. To support the show, subscribe at planetcritical.com, where you can read the weekly newsletter inspired by each interview. You can also become a Planet Critical patron. All links are in the description box below. As always, my deepest thanks to that community. Planet Critical wouldn't exist without your support. Thank you everyone for listening and for coming on this journey together.